I'm going to ask Councilman Nickel. Sir, are you available? I don't think he's logged in yet. Councilmember Barr, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Mayor, I don't believe we have a quorum convened at this moment, but I can ask Mitch to please confirm.
It looks like Councilmember Barr is logging on.
I see that we have Sanchez, Richard, Mulvihill, and Figueroa. So I believe we have a quorum. Councilmember Barr, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight?
Hey, everybody, please stand. Your hand over, right hand over your heart, please. Face north. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
to the United States of America
and to the
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councilmember Ibarra. I understand there is no reportable action from our city attorney. Let's move right into our city clerk. Miss City Clerk, would you please play the public comments tonight?
Yes, and just for the record, so that the public is aware, we did have technical difficulties today with our phone lines. So any voice recordings that came in after 3:30 are inaudible. But I did encourage them to submit their written comments, and we provided those to you prior to the meeting. And I will begin with the first message.
Hi, my name is Ruth Gold. I'm calling about curfew notification. My husband's phone number is listed as the Riverside number, and when they had curfew, they sent out a telephone blast, like a Amber Alert. I was waiting to get my alert from San Bernardino, and it never came through. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, do we have that available to us? And if we don't, can we make it available? Because everyone is not on social media, and we need to reach out to all of the citizens to make sure they're aware of what's going on in the city. Thank you.
This is for public comments. Good evening. My name is Jeanette McKeag, and I'm a resident of the 7th Ward. I'm calling in my concerns regarding the recent events in the city. The citizens once again were left to their own devices, scouring social media for the city update or much news direction. Instead, we have to rely on our community for such information. Citizens who have taken matters into their own hands to help keep their community safe. What kind of leadership is this? Leading citizens to fend for themselves crisis after crisis? These next day pre-taped recap videos are just not cutting it. Leaders lead. They don't hide until the coast is clear and it's safe to come out. Every one of you were elected because you thought you were the best person for the job. But where were you? There was one councilwoman giving updates and trying to relay information, but nobody heard from the mayor, the chief of police, or the city manager. The direction of a curfew came out an hour after it was implemented. Having a plan and sharing it with the community conveys, we got you. We're in this together. It conveys competent leadership who takes their job and their citizens' lives seriously. Our city was in trouble before the COVID crisis and these past days' events. These events just magnify the failure of our leadership in our city. Why on earth do we have a spokesperson for our city who has several sexual harassment lawsuits and bribery allegations against him as our PR person? What message are we sending new residents or businesses we'd like to attract to our city? We need to do better. We can start with calling for the mayor to step down and the mayor pro tem to step in and right this sinking ship. Thank you.
Debbie Ariola, 7th Ward. Here we are again with another crisis and no leadership. The city was being torn apart on Sunday night and we heard no voice from City Hall. We had no direction, we had no updates, we had nothing. We were on our own. Citizens were patrolling the streets and reporting back on social media. That's all the information we had. Some citizens were armed to protect their loved ones and property because they knew PD would not come. I'm all about community involvement, but I shudder to think what would have happened had there been a confrontation. I can't even put into words how betrayed I felt and continue to feel. You don't even have enough respect for us to keep us informed or protect us during a crisis. We should not have to search social media for updates, and we should not have to rely on our neighbors to protect us. It's maddening that this continues to go on. We pay taxes, we get no service, repeat. I urge you to look deeply into the financial management and leadership of the police department. Changes have to be made. The same old story of no money is getting old. And to the city manager, the council, and our disgraced mayor, either step up or get out of the way. Time for playing politics is over. We need you to do your job. Thank you for your time.
Esmeralda Negretti, San Bernardino resident. Good evening, council members and John Valdivia. Council members, I want to commend you for the decisions that you made yesterday. The reduction of spending for your office and the reduction of spending for the mayor's office is very commendable. I'm glad to see that you are reducing the wasteful spending. I would like to bring to your attention again, Section 308 of the Charter, Judge of Qualifications, which states the council shall be the judge of the election and qualifications of its members and whether grounds exist for forfeiture of their office. I bring this to your attention again because you have now become aware of the emails and letters that our elected city attorney had sent to John Valdivia when he was a council member. I bring this back to your attention because had some of that been addressed and followed through, I don't believe that he would have ever been elected, nor should have he been elected. And not only that, it could have saved the city thousands in lawsuits. The behavior has been a pattern. His abusive position, his abusive power. And I ask that you consider to take a ground in the same manner that you as a council, as a body, took a vote and were able to reduce his spending, that you consider this again and put it on the agenda. Act in good faith. If this is something that you're serious about, act in good faith. And tonight, put it on the agenda for the next council meeting. You have every legal right to represent the residents and to put this on the agenda. This is what we voted in UN for. Henry Nickel, you were asking for ways to reduce the spending. If you abolish the position of the mayor and start running the city in the same manner that other cities are run, which is in a council city manager rotation where every council member gets to be the mayor for a particular time, you would be saving the city not only just the $20,000, but the $148,000 that the mayor is receiving in his salary. That could open up our libraries. That could bring back a position or two in code enforcement. Our city needs resources, and those employees who are providing services to the residents are the ones who are needed. We don't need a mayor. We don't need a chief of staff. We don't need an assistant chief of police. Please consider abolishing those positions. You are in a place right now where you need to make those tough decisions, and it's nothing personal. This is what our city needs. You were elected by the people and not by the city manager, not by John Valdivia, not by the chief of staff. Please do what's in the best interest of the residents. Thank you.
Those are all the recorded messages that I have for tonight.
Okay, thank you very
Mayor,
much.
Mayor, excuse me.
Hold on, Fred. Hold on. I'm going to make a public statement regarding the action of our city as it relates to the curfew and the riots in our community. I am very grateful for the executive leadership team joining me at the Emergency Operations Center for a lot of the good work that we did in the last 72 hours. The city of San Bernardino has implemented a curfew that we'll ratify and address later today. Also on Sunday afternoon, beginning about 1 p.m. to about 2:30 a.m., your mayor was out there on the city streets assessing the situation, the damages, and obviously a lot of the street rioting and looting. At approximately 6 p.m., I called several other mayors in the region and activated our concerns for our policing department as a backup. I'm happy to report that nearly 450 officers or so from mutual aid agencies and other law enforcement agencies were in our city on Sunday night. I'm grateful for the men and women of our San Bernardino Police Department and the leadership of Terry Ledoux, Eric McBride, and a lot of our command staff at the police department. Had we not had the mutual aid that I was supportive of, I think our city would have been a much, much worse situation. I'm grateful for the corresponding and response from cities such as the city of Redlands, Colton, Fontana, Rialto, the cities of Montclair, Ontario, Chino, Victorville, Riverside, and also our San Bernardino Sheriff's Office, as well as CHP. I'm grateful for their backup support. And we, again, had nearly 450 or so law enforcement entities. Now, as it relates to the protests, we had nearly 400 to 500 congregate on the afternoon, Sunday, May 31st at approximately 4 p.m. descend on City Hall. It's their opportunity and their public right to do so, and I support that. At the end of the day, what happened was it turned into, as the evening progressed, it turned violent, and that's when we had to respond to protect our most important assets of our community. I'm grateful once again for our police department, their strong presence here in our city, and I'm grateful for the work that our executive leadership team did, including our city attorney, as I invoked and encouraged a curfew. So with that, Mr. Charette.
Thank you, Mayor. I had two comments that were emailed to me this afternoon, actually one earlier this week and one this afternoon that I was asked to read. So I'm going to read them. I also think it's important that when we're asked to read something, I want to state that I in no way, I've been asked to read these, but I'm in no way endorsing them or not endorsing them. I'm just simply reading what has been sent to me, and I will forward the emails on to our city clerk for the record. The first one is a comment that was actually called in at our last meeting, but the person, Dr. Margaret Hill, listened to it and believed that her message was too garbled to be understood clearly. So she asked that she send me a copy of it and that I read it for her. And she states the following: greetings, Mayor and City Council. I come to you with a problem and a solution. About 2 weeks ago, while driving east on 9th Street between East Streets and Waterman Avenue, there were large amounts of trash on the south side of the street in nearly every block. I was embarrassed to see my city look this bad, and I know there are other pockets that look just as bad. My solution is that you use funds to hire high school students, including other recent graduates, to beautify our city. These were some of the jobs provided by SBETA, San Bernardino Employment Training Agency, to provide to students during summer vacation. This was very effective until the city found ways to get rid of the program. On another subject, I do have a request that you consider employing residents of San Bernardino to fill some of your management positions, not just anyone, but those who are as qualified as those you have hired for the last 2 years or more years. We have them here in San Bernardino. They just need to be given an opportunity. This way, we will have employees who take pride in this beautiful city instead of employees who know where the freeway off-ramps are only. Please consider my request. Thank you, Margaret Hill. The next one, again, I'm reading it verbatim. Thank you, Councilman Charette, for reading my public comment tonight. I appreciate that you are available to residents, unlike my 3rd Ward representative. First, I would like to address agenda item number 8, the consultants for cannabis. I ask that this discussion be led by the Mayor Pro Tem and without the Mayor or Juan Figueroa. A new declaration was put out by a former cannabis applicant claiming that Valdivius and Juan were a part of a pay-to-play scheme and were requesting illegal payments from him. Additionally, the mayor has a cannabis consulting company because in San Bernardino, an elected official can open a consulting business on the same issues he can vote on, and that adds to the ongoing conflict of interest. We have enough litigation against us, as you discussed in closed session, and our liability premium has gone up 50% because the mayor and council have literally become a liability of the city. Next, I want to address the emotional breakdown of the mayor last night when you all rightfully cut his travel budget along with yours. Besides showing the public that the mayor is about as emotionally mature as a 2-year-old, he showed that he could care less about anyone but himself. While residents and the city suffer financially, he wants to continue to take vacations on their dime. We are losing services, and he wants a $20,000 2-hour-long dog and pony show for the state of the city. He is an absolute disgrace and needs to resign now. That would be the best financial cut the city could make. My last comment is about the behavior of the city manager last night towards Councilwoman Sandra Ibarra. While it is understandable that as a city manager going back and forth with a council member who is not seasoned or aware of their actual role can become absolutely irritating, but that does not give you the right to be unprofessional. You are a highly overpaid, underqualified temporary city manager who was hired so Valdivius could keep moving his agenda forward unrestricted. You need to check your attitude at the door because your legacy is that of someone who helped San Bernardino fail all over again after you sold your soul for a $70,000 boost to your PERS, probably why you kept dodging Fred's questions about PERS contributions and our unfunded liability last night. It is a shame what residents have to deal with in City Hall, and it needs to be corrected now. Sandra, I ask you to reconsider your position on your vote last night and move the budget cut recommendations forward. Throwing your vote away because you want to act like a petulant child only hurts the residents and is absolutely unacceptable. This isn't a game, folks. This is the livelihood of 216,000 residents and $134 million of their hard-earned money. Thank you, Dr. Treasurer Ortiz.
Oh, is she a doctor now?
I'm reading it verbatim.
Okay.
Well, Mayor, I have a public announcement.
Yeah, and I have a public comment that was
okay, just a moment, please. If you use the raise your hand feature, a lot of those allegations are untrue, but I respect Dr. Ortiz and her infinite wisdom and observations. Ms. Ibarra.
Yes. So before we start, I actually do want to reconsider my vote from last night to make the cuts to the to our offices for City Council and the Mayor. So I would like to make that that statement tonight that I like to change my vote.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Nickel.
Yeah, I have a public comment. The illegal fireworks have been so terrible. I communicated an address which was posted on Nextdoor of where they were coming from. Our lieutenant commander got back to me and asked me to contact the neighbor who posted the address and tell him to make a police report. I don't feel that that is my job. I feel that I reported the information to the police, and then they should be the ones to follow up and investigate. It is their job, not mine. That is anonymous from a resident. We've had a number of calls related to fireworks prior to the riots, and I anticipate leading up to the 4th of July, these will continue. And I appreciate the chief putting out the video, educating the public about the new regulations, the new fines and penalties. But we can certainly do better and do more. It's been pretty rough out there the last few weeks in terms of fireworks. And I am very concerned about the fire danger as well as the temperature heats up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. Let's,
Well, my hand is up.
Ms. City Clerk, I'm
My
sorry.
hand is up.
Go ahead, Basine, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. That's okay. So I have a letter written from Hardy Brown from the Black Voice News. With all of the protesting going on throughout the country over the murder of George Floyd by an on-duty police officer, Derek Chauvin, pressing his knee on Floyd's neck for almost 9 minutes caused me to weep. I could not cry out because it hurt so bad and brought back a memory of having a Palm Springs police officer pulled his gun on me as I repaired my Black Voice newspaper stand in front of the post office on Highway 111 in the city around 11 a.m. on Saturday morning. This current protesting brought back into my memory the 1965 Watts riot. My wife and I, along with friends, the late George and Verna Seldom, drove through Watts as the National Guard was parked on every intersection with machine guns in their hands, posed and ready to shoot. Burned out buildings were still smoldering on Central Avenue and 103rd Street. After the riot, Governor Pat Brown Sr. appointed the McCone Commission that identified lack of poor housing, employment, education, poor police relations, and the lack of healthcare services in the South Central community as many contributing factors for the unrest. Now, when I saw with my own eyes the appointing of 5 white officers by you to supervise the implement and the city's community policing program, it brought back a rage in me of being disrespected, discounted, disvalued, and invisible in this city. Only good for paying taxes to support a city that continues to discriminate against African Americans. It hurt me, but made me mad enough to come down here to fight back and let you know how I feel. Then I started to research one of the police departments and discovered that for 114 years, you have never hired or even considered hiring a Black as a chief or assistant chief, and you had only one captain who was Black. I want you to know I have had a personal relationship with the police department since 1972, before Warren Cock was appointed chief. As chairman of the police commission, I've introduced police officers of all races to my community. I still have hope and faith that this systematic racism will be put aside, and some of the top positions that you will fill before the year ends will be African Americans. I only have 3 minutes with a lot to say, but in the interest of time, I will conclude by saying, what you see happening across the country and our city is what I was trying to prevent. I am reminded of the shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept. He did not cry out loud, but silently wept as tears rolled down his cheek. He was mourning over the loss of his friend Lazarus. I wept because of the senseless death of George Floyd, but also for the way we are disrespected and treated in San Bernardino. The way this poor community pays law enforcement salaries in the 100,000 range, but cannot be employed by the city. And if we are employed, we are not promoted. I did not know George Floyd or the late Taisha Miller of Riverside, but I do know what good policing looks like, and what happened to them could not happen to me just because of the color of my skin. Or shall I say that them could happen to me because of the color of my skin. So I wept because some of my brothers and sisters whose skin is white will abuse their authority and power to kill me without any thought of being held accountable by society. That hurts worse than a few bad too few bad police officers. You still have the power and authority to begin a new path toward correcting the past 14 years of discrimination in this city. And that was written by Hardy Brown from the Black Voice News.
Okay, thank you very much. At this time, I'm going to ask our city clerk, because we did not call a roll. We were waiting on a few council members to join in and log in. Ms. City Clerk, if you would please call the roll.
Of course. Councilmember Sanchez.
Here.
Councilmember Ibarra.
Here.
Councilmember Figueroa.
Here.
Councilmember Charette.
Here.
Councilmember Nickel.
Here.
Councilmember Richard.
Here.
And Councilmember Mulvihill.
Here.
Mayor Valdivia.
Here, present. Thank you very much, Ms. City Clerk. This time, let's move into our staff reports, interim golf course management. The recommendation is a resolution number 2020-123, the Mayor and City Council, to ratify interim golf course management agreement between the City of San Bernardino and Shannon Hills Arcus LLC for the Shannon Hills Golf Course.
Mayor, I'm sorry. Before we take that item, may I bring up, we have an urgency item that we need to walk on the agenda, that if we could do that first.
I apologize. You're right.
That's okay. That's okay. I'll turn it over to our city attorney so she can walk you through that process. And then when she's done, I'd like our police chief just to say a few words on the events that occurred on Sunday evening.
Ms. City Attorney, your mic is muted. There you are.
Thank you. My apologies. Mayor and council members, as you know, the city did experience a safety emergency issue over the weekend, and to a great extent continues to address the safety issue. Subsequent to the posting of the agenda, events occurred on May 29th, 30, and 31st. There were legitimate protests throughout Southern California, and unfortunately, they came to the city of San Bernardino. There were a number of facts and evidence that was put into an executive order for the city manager to sign as the director of emergency services. Under state law, she had the ability to declare that emergency and to also establish a curfew. The state law does require the city council to affirm the declaration of that emergency. Staff has prepared a resolution number 2020-96 to ratify the city manager's actions and to proclaim the existence of a local emergency relating to the civil unrest. This resolution was posted to the city's website this morning. It has been shared with each of you in advance. So in order to add this item to the agenda, you would need to take action as a late-breaking, that this is a late-breaking item under Government Code Section 549, 54.2B2 of the Brown Act. So with that, I'd like to ask for a motion in a second to add this item to the agenda.
I will move to add the item.
Second.
Second.
And if the city clerk would please call the roll.
Councilmember Sanchez. Councilmember Sanchez.
Yes.
Councilmember Ibarra.
Yes.
Councilmember Figueroa.
Yes.
Councilmember Charette.
Yes.
Councilmember Nickel.
Yes.
Councilmember Richard.
Yes.
Councilmember Mulvihill.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Now, Ms. City Manager, at what point do you want to add this to the calendar tonight? What section?
It could be added to the consent calendar as an additional item.
Okay, let's do that.
But if you prefer, because the city manager was also going to ask the police chief to present you with a brief report, at the conclusion of that report, you can also take action on the item, and then we can proceed with the rest of the agenda.
What's the pleasure of the council? Why don't we hear the report from the police chief? We'll add this to the consent calendar. And if the police chief is available, please, Chief McBride, please make your presentation.
Great. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Common Council. Just a brief overview. I know that you received some of this information previously, but I want to highlight it again. So this past Sunday on May 31st, we had information that there would be up towards 6 separate protests in the city of San Bernardino starting at 4 p.m. that day. Ultimately, it turned out to be one protest that took place, and it gathered around downtown in front of City Hall. In preparation for that, because there was such a large number, we had a significant amount of officers from our department on scene at the police department on overtime to make sure that we could handle the event. We also, in addition to that, contacted local, county, and other state agencies who put their officers on alert at their own expense and had additional officers on standby. Ultimately, that would number several hundred additional officers in addition to the officers that we had on hand. In addition to that, we had a lieutenant from the California Highway Patrol and 2 captains from the Sheriff's Department embedded in our EOC at the San Bernardino Police Department. The initial protesters gathered downtown and numbered approximately 500 to 600. Our tactics on this generally is to allow people who want to peacefully assemble to gather and demonstrate and do their thing that they would do as long as it remains peaceful. So they gathered in downtown and they started walking around, and then they did cause some minor graffiti, but nothing significant. We had officers that would monitor the event to make sure that nothing major happened, because if it did, we are here to preserve life and property in the city. The group then kind of gathered to the front of the police department for a short time, but I also at this time want to thank the folks from the Way World Outreach Church, Robert Fuentes, his wife Veronica, his daughter Mariana, Marie Cabrera, and Gloria Fajardo, along with Maxine Briones, who gathered in the front of the police department, creating a barrier between themselves and the crowd in front of the doors to the police department, and they began to pray, which I think diffused the group there prevented them from making any damage to the police department. We also didn't go outside to confront the group. They were still peaceful at that time, but I think that it really went a long ways to have those folks from the church there to diffuse that. So then the folks left the San Bernardino Police Department and began walking eastbound on Fifth Street. When they came into contact with some California Highway Patrol officers who were gathered around a state-owned building as security, that group began to taunt and throw objects at the CHP, who then summoned assistance from additional officers from the California Highway Patrol and also asked for our assistance. At that time, the group began to get bigger. It fractured and began going in different directions, with a very large segment of it ended up near the Waterman Discount Mall. They began to damage property of businesses there, began to loot businesses. We had a large number of officers over then reclaimed the northeast section of the parking lot to ensure that they couldn't allow any further looting of the Waterman Discount Mall. But you can imagine that the group, when it got as large as over 2,000 people at one time, that the officers were greatly outnumbered. In addition to that, the subjects there were throwing rocks, bricks, bottles, fireworks, and actually there was even some shots fired at the officers. The officers showed tremendous restraint and didn't return in kind at the folks, obviously, because that's not our tactics. But they really couldn't push the suspects back away from some other buildings because they just didn't have the numbers. But when I said that the group fractured, they also went to other locations in the city and began to loot and damage property throughout the city. It was being live streamed, and so it caused other people to come into town. But I also think there was a lot of people that tended to take advantage of the situation, because then we started to receive information that Walmarts at different locations in the city, Home Depots and other businesses throughout the city began to be attacked and looted. In addition to that, folks were calling us, and our dispatch center was swamped. I think at one time we had over 300 calls for service in the city, because in addition to trying to protect the city's assets as long as the business assets of the community, there were still calls for service that we had to respond to, and we still endeavored to respond to those as quickly and effectively as we could. So the group got very large at moments. Ultimately, the officers were able to dislodge that group, and they dispersed throughout the city. But probably until about 2 o'clock in the morning, we were still encountering looting throughout the city, different areas. And you have to keep in mind that our city is over 70 square miles, and even with 400 officers, which is 150 officers more than we even have in our police department, it still took a lot to get it under control. we made multiple arrests. We made it, and I have to say that 2/3 of the arrests that we made were for people who had addresses from outside the city. So it was people who were seeing what was going on, and they were coming into San Bernardino to take advantage of our community. With that, I think the estimate was at one point with all the folks that were in here that in addition to the large crowd at the Waterman Discount Mall, that our officers were outnumbered 10-1. Officers did a phenomenal job. We have officers with large bruises from objects that struck them. Fortunately, we didn't suffer any serious injuries, and nobody from the public suffered any injuries as well. Of course, there was a significant amount of graffiti throughout the city. There was damage to businesses, and there was some looting. But fortunately, no buildings burned down. The city didn't suffer any huge losses in equipment or structures. And the officers they did a great job out there. And that's, bringing in over 150, or actually I'd say several hundred officers from outside, and maybe even closer to 500 officers total here in the city. With that, we've had the curfew in place. Since Sunday, we've had several demonstrations in the city. Fortunately, they've all been from folks who want to peacefully assemble and get their message across. And we encourage people to get their, exercise their First Amendment rights and get their message heard, as long as they don't want to destroy property of those or injure anybody else. We've had those several since, and we haven't had any problems. There is one scheduled for tomorrow, and we hope it goes as well as the others have over the last couple of days.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilman Nichol.
Yeah, I was out Sunday night, and I encountered the looting up here on the north end, and I completely respect the need that we had to defend our department, our station, the assets we have. But it did raise some concern with me. We're probably going to encounter, it's probably going to be a very difficult number of months still ahead. I anticipate with the elections in November, there'll probably be some other opportunities for individuals to take advantage of a significant amount of public unrest and concern. And I want to make sure that we're on top of this. So I would like to, I don't want to discuss all the matters that I believe we need to perhaps address and debrief on. So I'd like to ask the city manager if perhaps at our next regular council meeting, we can have an opportunity to have a closed session debriefing. There were some concerns that were brought to my attention by both residents and businesses. I am interested in how many arrests actually occurred, both Sunday night and since then. What are the efforts to prosecute the looters, the individuals that damaged our businesses? I met with a number of business owners on the north end that have yet to engage with an officer that have evidence, that have video evidence, that have mobile phones of these individuals that broke into their establishments, and what follow-up is going to occur, because we need to send a very strong message to discourage this from ever happening again. It was lawlessness up on the north end, and because of the need to defend the station, there was not a police presence that I could see for quite some time. And I was out, and I was very concerned about the safety of not only the residents, but the individuals that were conducting these crimes, because very quickly things could have escalated. And I want to make sure that going forward, we effectively respond to this. As you said, Chief, this is a big city. And what I noticed is they were using our major thoroughfares to go from place to place. They were using cell phones to communicate. They were guerrillas, and that's the only way I can describe them. They were guerrilla warriors going out and taking advantage of a city that is really exposed at this particular time, and we need to respond in a very effective way. So, how many arrests have occurred so far since Sunday?
Our department made 32 arrests that night for those people that were out there committing those offenses. You have to keep in mind that while we had thousands of people pelting our officers with rocks, bricks, and shooting at them, that is not the time to make those arrests. When we broke that up and they were in manageable numbers, that was the opportunity then to make arrests. because it doesn't do very well for 10 officers to wade into a crowd of 2,000. That would be very catastrophic for those officers. But we did make every effort to go out there and make a lot of arrests, as many as we could. Matter of fact, we hear a lot about boots on the ground, and just like in the Marine Corps, where every Marine is a rifleman first, every police officer, including our managers, is a cop first, and all our managers were out there in the field that were working, and some of them were making arrests just as much as a patrolman. So, but also, let's correct the record that for those, the security at the station, you have to keep in mind that we have thousands of guns in our gun locker, which are evidence, and along with a lot of other stuff. And while the impression is that all of the San Bernardino police officers were gathered around the police station protected, that's not the fact. The fact is that we detailed officers from another department that came in to provide station security while our officers were out there confronting the looting and the protesting and putting themselves on the line out there. And we did have people come back to the police department that we had to use gas at the front doors of the police station to repel them from breaking into the department. So you have to keep in mind that there was a pretty tenuous situation. And that I don't want the impression that the officers were thinking that the police department was more important than anywhere else in the city. That's not the fact. The fact is we need to protect the city infrastructure. That's, when the deem it's in terrorist events or anything else, you have to protect critical infrastructure. And the police department is critical infrastructure in the city. That being said, we are still moving forward. There are people who post a lot of stuff on social media that of them actively engaged in criminal acts. We scour that. We have the ability to obtain their account information through search warrants and such, and we are actively moving forward to identify as many people as we can. And our intent is to carry that out to the fullest extent of the law to prosecute them.
Yeah, and I would encourage you, if you can reach out to some of those business owners, I assume you probably already are, but a number of them came to me and said, I have video of who these people are, and I have their cell phone. It's in a bag in my office. And I'd like to see these individuals face justice. What we saw on Sunday was completely unacceptable. And these individuals that perpetrated these crimes, if we can track them down, I know resources are limited, but I would just encourage as much as we can to follow up on investigation. And one last point, I know other cities, I know the city of Ontario, other cities have utilized cellular technology to put out announcements related to the curfews. I'm not sure what we have to do to take advantage of that, but I know a lot of cities are doing that, and I don't know why we couldn't. I assume we could, but maybe Chief, you could elaborate on that in terms of what's required to put out those public announcements so we can keep the public well informed if and when there's an emergency or a curfew.
So that's a reverse 911 system. And so what it takes is to expend the money to buy the technology, to buy the program.
Well, that's a text message though, right?
That's, you can put a geo.
I got text messages in Ontario. So Ontario, as soon as you drive into cross the city boundary, you get a text message that pops up on your phone that tells you when the curfew is. And you're telling me that's reverse 911?
Yes, because you can geo fence off an area and send it to everybody that has a mobile cellular device in that geographical area or a hard line.
And we don't have that capability currently.
The city has never purchased it, no.
Okay. Yeah, I think if we could get a debriefing at the next council meeting during closed session, there's a couple of other items I'd like to discuss, but I don't want to discuss in public. Thank you.
Councilman Charette.
Thank you. As everyone knows, it was kind of a mixed bag, and you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. And no matter what, in a 65 square mile city, it's difficult to have a cop on every corner, or even with 450 and additional 150 or so mutual aid. So I understand that, and I hope the public understands that to some degree. Obviously, the public is only concerned, really, generally speaking, we're all concerned about our own backyard and our own little area that we work. But I want to share, and I wasn't in it. I didn't get out Sunday night. I was paying attention. I had a number of phone calls. I didn't go out and drive through the community. But on the 40th Street corridor particularly, and those of you who know where I live, I can kind of monitor it almost visually from my house. And I didn't hear a lot of activity. I didn't see a lot of red and blue lights indicating police officers' presence. And so my assumption, other than a couple of calls, was that things were somewhat quiet. I found out later, indeed, they weren't very quiet. There were a number of places hit, as you said, Chief, not significant damage, broken windows and some broken screens and things like that. But there were a group of people kind of led by the Wildwood neighborhood president, Tony Marzullo and Larry Lakes, who has the flooring company up here. And they spoke very highly of your responsiveness and how you were up here. I don't know with how many officers, but they actually experienced arrests being made. They were obviously helping try to diffuse the situation and assisting your officers. And they spoke highly of it. I know that you're getting a real a beating for not being everywhere at every place, but I just wanted to share that one comment that came from the 40th Street corridor. I know all the businesses don't feel exactly that way, but those people that were out there and saw it happening and were actually engaged in it, they felt like the police officers that were here, albeit maybe not as many as we would have liked to have seen, really did a thorough and a good job. So I'm going to try to give you a little bit of an accolade rather than beat you up. And again, I did go across 40th Street and out to the Walmart shopping center and talk to a number of businesses. They all have different experiences, but generally speaking, it was fairly light considering. It was broken windows, a little bit of looting at the AutoZone store here on 40th Street, but they didn't get too far with some of the other businesses that they breached or that they broke windows on. So again, I want to compliment you, but I don't want to say that we should just that's the whole story. There were a lot of areas to cover. I think you did what you could. We've always got to do a better job in these situations, and of course, the public is hoping that we can get intel on these things going in and be prepared for them and be waiting for them, so to speak, at the front door. And that's not always possible. I got calls today that there was intel about starting in Colton and kind of moving this direction into San Bernardino. I checked with Lieutenant Carell and Lieutenant Fivey, and they indicated that indeed you all had the same intel and that you were monitoring the situation and watching it. So though we can't be everywhere at all times, I do appreciate the efforts that your officers, your department, and the mutual aid that we were assisted through the Sheriff's Department and CHP and other surrounding agencies. I appreciate that. I'm not going to say we got to do better. We know that, and we're always trying to do better. So thank you very much for what you did. And I echo Councilman Nichols' concerns about follow-up and going after these people. I do have a number of businesses that say, I call them and I've got them on video and we've got them right there at our front door, and we give them the video and nothing ever happens. And I know it's easier said than done, but we've got to be following up on these leads and these videos. Everyone's got the video cameras these days, and we've got to be doing a better job. That's not to say you're not doing a good job, but we've got to always work towards doing a better job of following up on these and getting these people arrested and send a real message that we're serious. So,
okay,
one thing I just wanted to follow up on is that during the event on Sunday, a lot of this is being live streamed. A lot of these protesters are being directed by people on social media, and they were given direction to go to the Citrus Plaza in Redlands and also go to Highland and start looting. And that did occur as well. So Redlands had to pull back their officers that they had provided on mutual aid, and the Sheriff's Department had to redirect some folks that night as well. Every agency has done a tremendous job. It's at great cost, as you can all imagine, to keep this number of officers available. We also provided officers the other night to the city of Riverside because everybody is actually assisting, and it's costing quite a bit of money to maintain this level of staffing to provide mutual aid, not only to us, but to other agencies as well.
Well, I thank you, but I also want to echo this idea of this reverse 911, and we've got to be looking into that. I gotta, it's the, I guess, the child thing, and you get it on your phone all the time. It's allowed, everybody gets it.
Yep.
And
Thank
Jessica, the Jessica thing, and I got it from Ontario, and I got it from Riverside, and I have a number of people that have called me and said, why, and we heard it on public comments tonight. Why aren't we doing the same thing?
Okay,
Well,
thank you, Fred. We got to get moving.
Okay, but I have
Councilmember,
a
why do
comment.
we have to get moving,
Real
John?
quick.
Why do we have to
Councilmember,
get moving? We're covering some very important territory here.
Councilmember Richard, please go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the things that I have to say is that thank you to the police department for the work that you did, that there was no injuries. First of all, we have to look at the issue at hand. We're not talking about, in the city of San Bernardino, we have to talk about the looting. We're talking about that, and we're bringing focus on the negative part. But the positive part is the part that we are looking for resolve. We as African Americans, we should not have to die in the hands of a police officer. So this is what it's all about. When you see Black Lives Matter all across the country, and you see positive people out there, and they're protesting, positive protesting, but then we want to focus on the negative, and the negative is the looting. But the people that are protesting are not necessarily the same people that are doing the looting. So what I want to say is to the police chief, yes, thank you. You guys did an excellent job that Sunday night. I was not out there, but I was in contact with the mayor. I was in contact with my lieutenant, Mahan, and we were on the phone all night. So thank you for what you guys did. But don't ever have the conversation without thinking about the real issue. And the real issue is that Black Lives Matter, and African Americans should not die at the hands of a police officer. Stop focusing on the negative, and let's start focusing on the positive and read the reason why this is happening. We know that I truly believe, looking at statistics, it does not always happen within the city of San Bernardino, but that doesn't mean it could not. So when we talk about it, we need to start thinking about sensitivity training and everything that we could think about to make sure. Because you know what? I have 2 African American boys, and I want to always make sure, and I should say men because I get mad because I call them boys, but 2 African American men, and I would hope every single night that they make it home safe and they don't get pulled over just because of the color of their skin. But this is something that has been happening countrywide or worldwide, mostly country, and we have to focus on that. Start talking about that and stop talking about the looting, because those looting are just, the people that are looting, they're hurting too, but there's a whole lot of opportunists out there that are taking advantage of the situation. And that's why I continue to say thank you to the police department for putting the stop to all of that and the end to that. And with this, talking about a curfew, I believe that we need to continue on with this curfew, at least until maybe Sunday. Let's let the police officers get a wrap on what's going on. Let's let the businesses get a wrap on what's going on, assess what's going on in our city, and then let's move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Barr.
Just a quick question. I did get some messages of people that have footage and videos, multiple videos, and they were turned away with their evidence. How can they go about and submitting it to our PD so that they can be followed up on?
Just call our dispatch, or if you have their contact information, provide it to your district commander, and those district commanders will follow up on it.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Councilmembers.
And
Oh,
if
sorry,
this,
go ahead.
thank you.
You have more, Councilmember?
Yeah, it was about earlier. I had made a comment about changing one of my votes from last night, and I believe with that vote, my no becomes a yes to reconsider the council and mayor's office. So that will be a 5-2 vote.
Talking about the policing and the riots and the curfew.
Okay.
So we'll come to that issue in just a few moments. Okay, Ms. Ibarra?
Okay, just want to make sure that it.
I heard you. I got it. Thank you. Council members, any other comments? If not, let's.
I just want to give a quick thanks as well. I know that, we've all gone around. I won't be long-winded about this, but I also, just to tack on to what Councilmember Richard said as well, is that it's unfortunate that all these actions really have taken away from what the focus really should have been. And that really truly is unfortunate. I do believe that we should remain focused on, and I think eventually we will get back to that. But I do want to thank our police department, our police officers. I'm sure they're probably exhausted from and tired from all this and all the work that they've put in. I also want to thank our public works, excuse me, our public works department as well the following day, along with many of the volunteers that did show up for the cleanup efforts as well. Many of the residents in our city and even surrounding cities as well showed up to clean up the following day. And so I'm grateful for their efforts as well.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to our staff reports. Item number 1 is the interim golf course management agreement. Ms. City Manager.
Sure, Mayor. Mike Huntley is going to join us. As you know, the Shannon Hills Golf Course belongs to the city, and the leasee pulled out during COVID, but they've agreed to maintain it while we make other plans. So Mike's going to go through his presentation with you on this.
Thanks, Terry. Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, to provide a little bit of background, the Shannon Hills Golf Course is actually owned by the City of San Bernardino. It's about 112 acres, and it's located 3380 Little Mountain. The Shannon Hills Golf Course was built back in the 1980s, includes an 18-hole golf course, about 18,000 square feet clubhouse and banquet facility, and a maintenance facility on the property. The property was owned by the former redevelopment agency. And then in 2015, the State Department of Finance actually approved the city's long-range property management plan as part of the dissolution and winding down of redevelopment activities. As part of that, the Shannon Hills Golf Course was transferred by the successor agency to the city of San Bernardino. Over the years, the golf course has been managed by outside lessees who had actually operated and maintained the property. Most recently, the lease was assigned to a company called CF Shannon Hills ARS LLC, and I'll just refer to them as ARSIS tonight. Annual revenue for the golf course is approximately $200,000. The city does receive some additional funds through the residual receipts and some sharing. Revenue of that facility generates between $230,000 to $290,000 to the city's general fund. As the city manager did mention, on April 6th of this year, the city of San Bernardino did receive a letter from ARSIS associated with their termination of the lease within 30 days from the date the city had received the letter. And this also fell directly on the heels of the COVID-19 pandemic, which didn't make things any better. Since I'm receiving the letter from the operator of the golf course, city staff has been working with this operator looking for options to be able to continue to operate the golf course. In our discussions, they did indicate that they would be willing to operate the golf course on an interim basis only. And as such, staff has worked closely with them to identify and work through an interim golf course management agreement for that property. But the city didn't want to see happen is this operator walk away from the property and leave the property idle and unmaintained. That's the last thing the city wanted to see, especially during the beginning of this pandemic. So as such, the city was concerned with the termination of this. As indicated, the termination would occur 30 days after their letter was submitted to the city. The city manager worked in earnest to actually move forward with creating that lease so that there wouldn't be any issues associated with the operation of the golf course and would still continue to operate or be maintained. The termination of the golf course lease and the emergency caused by the spread of the COVID pandemic created an urgent need to ensure that the city's golf course property is maintained and preserved. As part of that, the city manager, under her authority, had executed the interim golf course agreement to ensure that it would continue to operate. At about the same time, the county had finally allowed golf courses to reopen, which then would continue to provide the revenue they weren't getting. And they were closed for about 30 to 45 days during the pandemic due to an order from the county. with us and with the city manager moving forward with executing this agreement, as soon as the county gave the authority to reopen, that allowed them to open and then continue to generate revenue to the city. The interim lease is good for 12 months, and either party has the right within 60 days to terminate that lease either way. At this point, this interim golf course agreement gives the city an opportunity to evaluate the existing facility itself and kind of see what the city would like to do with it. Does the city want to maintain it as a golf course? Is there a higher and better use council wants to consider? There's other options we have right now. So per direction from the city manager, we have actually gone out and we've ordered a title report of the property to evaluate any liens that might exist on the property. We're also in the process of ordering an appraisal to get a clear-cut idea of what the value of the property is as a golf course or some other similar type of use on the property. That allowed council to come up with a better or get a better understanding of what the highest and best use of that property would be. So really at this point, what we're asking council to do is to ratify the interim golf course management agreement between the city and ARIS. At this time, really what you'd be doing is ratifying that agreement. Once that is executed, then staff will continue to look at the golf course and other issues. So with that, that concludes my presentation. I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Huntley. Mr. Nickel.
Yeah, I actually live almost directly across the street from that golf course, and it's a great amenity to our community. I know it was on our long-range property management plan as part of the redevelopment dissolution. I'm curious, about a year and a half ago, we conducted a comprehensive facilities assessment. Was this property included on that? Did we assess the condition of this facility in that assessment that we paid for?
I will check and let you know in a few minutes.
Okay. Yeah, because I'd hate for us to spend more money on assessing the property when we've already assessed it a number of times in the context of our long-range property management plan and our facilities assessment. I do support the interim. Alex, did you find out?
Yes, sir. Yes, we did. And a matter of fact, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 reports on one for the clubhouse, one for the maintenance for the restrooms, and for a couple of restrooms in there, and the golf cart storage building. So we have an assessment for that.
Okay. Yeah, I think it'd be wise for us to look at that. But I support the recommendation.
Okay, is that your motion, Councilman?
Yes, I'll make a motion to accept recommendation.
And there's second, Mulvihill. All right. Any other further discussion? Okay.
I have a question.
Councilman Mulvihill.
Yeah, I see that the current agreement goes until June 30th of 2021. It seems that there's been a pretty good cash flow from that on year by year as this ARSIS has been maintaining it. There's been a decent cash flow. Is that right, Mr. Huntley?
That's correct.
Yeah. And I just, what would happen if, given the 60 days, if they pull out of it? What alternatives do we have?
Well, I think really at this point, that was the situation we were in right now, to be honest with you. They gave us actually even less than that. They just gave us 30 days, and we were scrambling in the middle of a pandemic to try to find a solution. So I guess what I'm going to share with you, the current operator was negotiating possibly selling their lease to another operator right now.
Okay.
So there is someone who's looking at it as an opportunity.
Okay.
City manager, I have spent some time, talked with that group. So there might be someone who we could do an interim lease with also. But if we really want to do it right, we should go out and do an RFP and vet an operator. But there is someone out there who's very interested in this facility.
Good, because I remember when we did get the, I guess, the ARSIS lease the property way back about 6 or 7 years ago. And it does seem to be, generate a good cash flow. I'm not a golfer. Fred could probably chime in on this and say what kind of a golf course it is. But again, it does have a good cash flow, and it's good that we got a plan B, that there's somebody on the wings possibly. Thank you.
Sure.
My comment is it's a good golf course if it's making $290,000 a year.
One other thing that might be an opportunity for us to consider is I have floated this with several members of the community, especially in the country club area. This is just food for thought. We understand that the Arrowhead Country Club is undergoing some management issues, but there might be an opportunity for a land swap with this particular one, since Shannon Hills is owned by the city. That is something for future discussion and a policy direction from the city council. But it might be a good opportunity for us to divest ourselves of Shannon Hills and do a land swap agreement with Arrowhead Country Club. We retain the beauty of Arrowhead Country Club, the integrity of it, because now it would be city maintained or owned for the short interim. And then conceptually, the idea would be to possibly even if there's future development opportunities along Shannon Hills Golf Course, allow that for more development and tax base. So that's a policy discussion that really does need some evaluation, but that will have to be from direction from the city council, and I realize that. But it's a good opportunity to protect the integrity and safeguard of our Arrowhead Country Club because there is a lot of management issues there. So that's one possible solution. There's a motion on the table and a second by Councilman Mulvihill. If there's no further discussion, Ms. City Clerk, if you'd please call the roll.
Councilmember Sanchez,
Yes.
Councilmember Ibarra,
Yes.
Councilmember Figueroa,
Yes.
Councilmember Charette,
Yes.
Councilmember Nickel,
Yes.
Councilmember Richard,
Yes.
Councilmember Mulvihill.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to our public hearings portion of tonight's meeting, resolution of the Mayor and City Council on the City of San Bernardino approving the issuance of bonds. The recommendation is two-part: to conduct a public hearing of TEFRA and the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 as amended, and two, adopting the resolution of the Mayor and City Council 2020-08. I'm opening the public hearing tonight, beginning at approximately 8:09 p.m. Could I please get a staff report on this item?
Mike, is this going to be you or Gretel?
Let's see if Gretel's on. Give me a minute, and if not, I'll just jump right in. All right, I'll just jump right in. So really what's being...
Michael, I'm here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm here.
So...
This is Gretel.
Yeah, thanks, Gretel. Honorable Mayor, members of City Council, Gretel Noble, she's my housing manager. She'll do the presentation on this item. Gretel?
Okay. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. Before you for your consideration and adoption is a resolution that would approve the issuance of housing revenue bonds in an amount not to exceed $55 million. The bonds are for the acquisition, rehabilitation, and financing of an existing multifamily community that has 239 apartment units and is located at 2601 through 2675 West 2nd Street. The bonds will not be an obligation of the City of San Bernardino, but under the Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act, or TEFRA, the city must approve the issuance of the bonds and hold a public hearing, allowing the public to comment on the issuance of the bonds. The units will be affordable to households earning between $26,000 and $38,000 for a family of 4 per year. And the units are currently occupied by households earning in that income range. What the bonds provide is that the units then would be permanently affordable as a result of the financing. Adopting the resolution for issuance of the bonds meets the city's consolidated plan goal of preserving the city's housing stock and the council's strategic goal of improving the quality of life of its residents. Basically, that concludes my presentation, and I can answer any questions you may have, or the applicant is also on the line, and if I can't answer them, they can.
Okay, thank you very much. If you hold your comments, city council members. Ms. City Clerk, do we have any public comments on this particular item?
No, we do not.
Okay, now I'm closing the public hearing at approximately 8:12 p.m. for deliberation and action. Is there a motion? Mr. Mulvihill, you have a question?
Yes, Gretel. I'm really pleased to see that this is going to be maintained available to individuals with 30 to 60% of the area median. But once we take it over and we start rehabbing, are we going to be displacing people from their apartments?
No. Typically, when the developer does this type of project, they phase the project in. So either what I've seen in the past is they'll go in and do a unit for a period of time, and they can relocate the household to another apartment in the complex, but there's no displacement. That's part of the process. Good. They cannot displace households.
Good. I'm pleased to hear that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion, but I have a question.
I'll second it.
My question is this particular property in pretty much of disrepair at the present time? Is there going to be or are we just upgrading it and rehabbing it to bring it up into a better standard, or is it in disrepair?
Can the applicant answer that?
And one of the reasons I looked, I haven't been by it, but I looked at it on Google Earth, and it looks like a pretty nice facility.
Right. Please go ahead, Mr. Moen. Welcome.
Hi. My name is Jeff Moen, and I am with the sponsor of the project, which is Standard Communities based in Los Angeles. And just to address that question, the property is in decent condition. I think it's been fairly well maintained by the current owner. We're acquiring it and using tax credits and the bonds that you're considering in order to preserve it for the long term. It does have some systems needs, and we are going to invest in systems for energy efficiency. We're going to rehab the interiors of all the units. We are going to add some amenities for the residents. We're going to provide space for after-school classes and services on the property as well. And we're going to fully upgrade the property. But I think I agree with your point. It's in decent shape right now, but we're going to look to use this as an opportunity to make sure that it's preserved for the long term. And it will have a 55-year use agreement. And, we think we'll be in great shape for the long run after this.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There's a motion and a second. If the city clerk would please call the roll.
Question.
Councilman Figueroa.
Just to clarify, it's my understanding that this isn't only to upgrade the units, but the facilities as well. So if there's a swimming pool or picnic area or playground area, barbecue area, is that also included? I'm not sure if there's like a laundry service. Is that also now being included, or is it just the units that you're focusing on?
It's the units and all of the amenities that you mentioned, and we will actually be adding additional amenities as well. With regard to fitness facilities and classroom space and some other things, but that will all be part of the project.
Are there any issues with parking in that area that might be addressed?
I'm not aware of any issues with parking. The property does have a number of parking spaces, both carport and surface spaces, that are enclosed behind, a gate around the property. And our understanding of the way that's been managed is that there's sufficient parking for the residents and guests there currently.
Okay.
And that it meets the zoning requirements.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. If city clerk would call the roll, please.
Councilmember Sanchez?
Yes.
Councilmember Ibarra?
Yes.
Councilmember Figueroa?
Yes.
Councilmember Charette?
Yes.
Councilmember Nickel?
Yes.
Councilmember Richard?
Yes.
Councilmember Mulvihill?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move into our consent calendar tonight. Councilman Sanchez, polls?
None.
Councilmember Ibarra?
Don't have any.
Councilmember Figueroa?
None.
Councilmember Charette?
I have none.
Councilmember Nichol?
Yeah, I just had a general comment on some of these contract items, given COVID and the time it takes to do procurements. We'd like to see us really be more aggressive in terms of negotiating. I think, certainly the city's having to cut its budget. We're trying to find ways to tighten our belts. So just a general comment. It may be something that I press on in the future. A lot of constituents are asking me, is this really the best price we can get? And I'd like to get that assurance from our staff that we're doing everything possible, given the circumstances, that we negotiate as best and as hard as we can.
Okay, so thank you, Councilman. So Councilmember Richard?
I have none.
Councilmember Mulvihill?
I have none.
All right, motion for approval?
Move the balance or move all of it.
Yes, City Manager.
I've had a request from the Public Works Director to pull item numbers 11 and 14. They need more time. They have some changes on those, so we'll be bringing those back. And then I also wanted to remind you that you do have the walk-on resolution that you need to consider on the consent calendar.
Yeah, and I would like to discuss that resolution quickly, if I may.
I'll move the balance of consent.
Yeah, let's pull the resolution if we can.
Okay, said that, so I'm sorry, the polls were 11 and 14 administrative polls, so move them from tonight's calendar, is that right?
Yes, and the Public Works Director can tell you why if you want. I think she just
No,
needs
that's fine. 11 and 14, pull them, and with those noted, we'll move the balance by Councilman Charette. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, members would cast their votes.
Okay, Councilmember Sanchez,
Yes.
Councilmember Ibarra,
Yes.
Councilmember Figueroa,
Yes.
Councilmember Charette,
Yes.
Councilmember Nichol,
Yes.
Councilmember Richard,
Yes.
Councilmember Mulvihill.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's discuss the emergency executive order. This really reflects the importance of a curfew and the flexibility of providing law enforcement the tools necessary to do their job. I've been out on the streets Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday, and I'll be going out probably later after a city council meeting. I think that the curfews do have a soothing calm to our community. There are a lot of concerns still of apprehension within our tax-paying community, and very much concerned about our business corridors. And with the ensuing sensitivity to the issues surrounding regional cities and the impacts to our city, I think it is completely within keeping that we should continue the curfew. This is something that, again, has a flexible opportunity for our law enforcement. And so that discussion now is before you. It's really been pulled by Councilman Nichol. Councilman Nichol?
Yeah, and I'm getting differing information from different sources in terms of the scope of the threat currently. And just like the COVID situation, you want to make sure you don't overreact to a circumstance as well. Some of our businesses are closing early because of this. It's created some confusion. I know some areas of the state are beginning to, have some flexibility in terms of when that curfew is imposed. Obviously, I think earlier is better if there is a threat. But what do we anticipate in terms of how long this curfew will likely extend? What will be the basis upon which we decide to perhaps rescind this curfew? What are we dealing with? Is this just indefinite? Maybe the city manager can help us understand how this works.
Sure. Let me read you Section 8 of the actual order. This curfew shall remain in effect until such time that it is terminated by either the Director of Emergency Services, which is me, or the City Council, or the termination or expiration of the local emergency. The Director of Emergency Services is directed to announce the curfew and penalties for violating the curfew on the city's website and other available messaging options. So I've been relying on the police chief because he's the expert in this case. I want to help the police department out and do the best thing. So we're taking it day by day at this point. I don't have a set time.
Okay, and do we have credible threats still that justify the curfew?
Let me ask the chief to address that.
So we don't have any intelligence that says that there's going to be an active group that's going to come loot or damage or do anything, cause mayhem in the city. There does persist to be some groups that want to gather, and there have been since Sunday, but most of them, all of them have been peaceful. We haven't had any damage or anything like that. There now is starting to be a trend across some cities where groups are gathering to protest the curfew. I think it's in an attempt to goad the police departments into action. And so I don't know that we really necessarily want to cause that because that's what some groups want. They want to cause the police department to go out, and then they want to, it's almost like wanting something bad to happen. So I don't know that we want to be in that situation where we have an expectation that we go arrest these folks who are doing a sit-in maybe, and then it just causes some more.
Right, and the reason is we're in the summer. Obviously, we still have the COVID situation, so people are, kids are at home. Summer evenings, people like to have family gatherings and, go to the park, have a picnic or whatever. And right now at 6 o'clock, everybody's got to grab their stuff and bolt. So I think it is a balance. It's finding a reasonable balance. Some have asked me, why don't we just push it back later? And then if you need to, you can make it earlier again. Obviously, if there is still a threat, we still need some mechanism. And from what I've seen, a lot of the looting happens sort of later. But if you have a credible intelligence that the group is going to gather, obviously I'd prefer that we set an earlier curfew. But if not, I think maybe later is better. Some of our business owners have said, if you can make it 10 o'clock, I can actually still do business and can actually get some money so we can keep the city afloat. But if I have to close at 6, a lot of these places, that's sort of prime time for some of these businesses, especially restaurants and eateries and so forth. And that's sales tax revenue we aren't going to get. That's revenue the city's not going to get. So it's a balance. I get it. I just want to make sure where our response is proportional to the threat and that we just don't overreact and then we end up shooting ourselves. And I was, by the way, a strong advocate for the 6 o'clock curfew, by the way.
Councilman, I think the rationale as I was on conference calls and speaking with even our supervisors and the chairman of our board of supervisors, the curfew has a psychological impact on the individuals in our community, and really it's more of an announcement outside that we're looking for. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is that if we were to push it back later to 8 p.m., that's right around when the sun sets here in the city. That's when there's a corresponding correlation to increased looting and outbursts of vandalism. So the thought was, from a regional perspective, is to have it earlier, the curfew, so that there would be preparation and downtime at about 2 hours or so for the community to understand, hey, get inside, stay home, and let the police officers do and continue their patrols. I do respect what you're saying, though. I mean, it is proportional. I think the balance is that we are COVID. This is important. But I think this is where our nerves in our community, in our region, and our nation are still raw. And this is a very sensitive issue. And I think that it would be wise for us to continue and allow us to continue with the curfew. Councilmember Richard, please proceed.
So thank you. So Councilmember Nickel, I appreciate everything that you said, and I know that that's coming from all the people that hired you in the position that you're in. So, but you think about what's happening and all the looting and everything and this curfew. It didn't come from the COVID. It came from the rioting and everything that happened. But because of the rioting, again, it comes from the injustice that was done with George Floyd. So, but guess what? The community across the country wanted to make sure that all of the officers that were involved were going to be convicted or were going to be handled. So they have all been charged. And so I think that there's going to be some kind of fall through with that because they've all been arrested. They've all been charged. So what I say is that things are going to settle down. But I think that because there's a lot of people that don't have, like everybody been saying all night, they don't have social media, they don't have access to certain things that will talk to them about what's going on. What I say right now is that we need to continue on with the curfew because I believe in our police department. I believe in the safety of our city and to continue to keep our city safe. And I say just until Sunday. Let's give it till Sunday and then let's move after that. I mean, I want to make sure that everybody is safe in our city, just not in my ward, but everything happened really in Sandra Ibarra's ward. And so what I want to make sure is that Sandra Ibarra's ward is taken care of. Everybody's ward is taken care of in the city of San Bernardino. And dealing with a curfew at 6 o'clock, I think that we're following the process of the county of San Bernardino. And we just need to all stick together and say, this is what we're going to do. And that's what I believe in. And that's where my vote is going to be.
Councilman Charette.
Thank you. My understanding is that Rancho Cucamonga lifted theirs today. They're part of the county. I have just a personal feeling based on what I'm hearing, seeing that things are starting to lighten up.
Nobody looted in Rancho Cucamonga.
Well, I do support a curfew. I have some questions though, and maybe the chief or somebody legal can answer them for me. I'm asked a lot of questions by people that think a curfew means that at 6 o'clock the streets should be empty. And I would just use Stater Brothers as an example. If at 7:30 I get in my car and drive over to Stater Brothers and go in and get a quart of milk and come back, have I violated the curfew? And I think those are the kinds of things people are asking. Can they drive through a McDonald's and get a hamburger? Or does that mean a curfew mean that everything in the city of San Bernardino stops at 6 o'clock? Because I think that's kind of what Henry was suggesting. Not suggesting that that's what's happening, but that people are concerned that we're going to have to stop. We have to go home and hunker down at 6 o'clock in the evening. Is that the fact?
So the way the curfew order, council member, is written is it's written to actually be a tool for the police. It's not written or intended to be a restriction on people, although it has that impact of restricting movement. It has a provision in there that one needs to personally be asked to vacate the public street before they would actually be cited. So I know this is a question that comes up, but obviously if the city is going to impose a curfew, it's being done because the law enforcement in connection with the city manager feel that there is an imminent threat to the public. If you do not believe that that imminent threat exists throughout the entire city, you can frame a smaller geographical area for your curfew. And so you can narrow it down to serve its purpose. All that this current resolution does is affirms the local declaration of an emergency. That's all this reso is doing. And then giving that authority to declare those curfews, the time, the extent, the location, giving that to your director of emergency services. So what I'd recommend is that the council take action on this resolution, make sure that the police chief and the city manager have been very carefully listening to this conversation, understand your concerns, and to the extent that they need to continue to order a curfew, that they narrow it down to the areas where they see imminent threat.
Okay, well, so in other words, the purpose of a curfew in the strictest sense is period. If I look out my window tonight and see someone at this point in time driving on the streets, they're violating the curfew.
Well, the curfew does say that that you are not to be on the public streets, but it does have exceptions for people who are traveling to or from work,
Right.
or to provide emergency services.
Right.
But yes, we don't want people to leave their house and go to McDonald's, particularly if it's in an area where we've experienced some civil unrest.
All right. Well, I understand that. So the strictest sense is that a curfew is a curfew, and it really means that you're off the streets at 6 o'clock, and the policeman can pull you over and question you as to what you're doing out, and you better have a good answer, or you can be arrested or cited or something. What?
Well, I believe
that becomes then a judgment. I'm sure it's a judgment call for the police officer, right, Chief?
Right.
Because officers always have discretion. There's no absolutes, and so that officer would, take into consideration what the person's activity they're involved in. If it seems like it's legitimate, traveling to and from work, obviously, that they would direct them to go home because of the curfew, and they wouldn't be arrested. And stuff.
So wave your arm, Chief, till the lights come back on.
Yeah, so again, I would renew my request that you can take action on the resolution and continue to share with your staff any concerns you have about its application.
Well, I support the idea of a curfew. I really do. And I think 6 o'clock, I'm with Henry too, at 8 o'clock, but where do you draw the line and how do you do that? I'll go with the will of the council on this one.
Would there be a problem pushing the time back? The chief, would you see a problem with that currently, given what you know, and knowing that I don't really want to know what you know, but I'd like to at least know whether or not 6 is reasonable, or maybe
8 o'clock.
Yeah, we could push it back later. I'm just hearing from a lot of businesses that are saying, just as we opened up, now you hit us with a curfew.
Yeah.
It seems that most groups tend to gather between 4 and 6. For instance, there was a walk yesterday that was originally scheduled to start about 6, and I spoke to them and asked if they could move it up and have it completed by 6, and they did. We encourage people to peacefully assemble and get their message across. Unfortunately, it's being drowned out by those who want to do damage to the city. So if they can get in there, get it done, and get out, and those are usually the people that aren't causing the problems, the ones that want to have their voices heard.
Right.
They're not the ones causing the problem. It's the ones who come later that tend to have those problems.
So 6 o'clock, you'd say, would be reasonable at this time? Continue to keep the 6 o'clock?
Or if to push it back to 8, I don't think there's too much of a difference, in my opinion. It's up to the council, but we don't have any, immediate threats that we're aware of in the community. So it's definitely.
I think the 8 o'clock would probably help some businesses out.
I can support pushing it back to 8.
Yeah, I'm good for that.
I move to change it to 8 o'clock.
I second it.
And as somebody that pushed for 6 o'clock, I'll support 8 o'clock.
Thank you, Henry.
Well, that would be direction to staff, and then if you could take action on the resolution itself. If you could amend your motion to include adoption of the resolution.
And 8
Who
o'clock.
made the motion?
I did.
All right. Can you amend your
Why don't
motion?
you do that? Amend your motion to incorporate adopt the resolution then. Are you amenable to that?
I'm amenable.
Okay, and
I'm amenable.
you're okay with that?
I'm okay with the second.
Okay, all right, great. All right, City Clerk, if you call the roll, please.
Councilmember Sanchez,
Yes.
Councilmember Ibarra,
Yes.
Councilmember Figueroa,
Yes.
Councilmember Charette,
Yes.
Councilmember Nickel,
Yes.
Councilmember Richard,
Yes.
Councilmember Mulvihill.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on. We're going on to our items to be referred to committee. Why don't we take up the issue of Councilmember Ibarra? Ms. Ibarra, you want to change your vote. Ms. Carvejo, can you instruct us on how do we do that and give us instructions and guidance on that?
Okay. I think Ms. Councilmember Ibarra mentioned at the beginning of the meeting that she wanted to move forward with a reconsideration of her vote. We could go through that formal process tonight, but it really will not allow you to discuss it at this meeting. You'd have to agendize it for another meeting. So what I might offer as a more efficient approach is just that if Ms. Ibarra has decided to change her vote, she can simply give that direction to the city manager to bring back the budget with that alternative in it. Mm-hmm. And at that time, the council can vote on those items that Ms. Ibarra had previously addressed. So my recommendation is rather than go through a formal reconsideration, re-agendize it, rediscuss it, just put the issues back onto the budget when you address it.
June 17th.
Okay, Councilmember, are you amenable to that? Is that okay with you?
Yes, I just wanted to make sure that when we get it back before us, that is, sorry, it's been a long day for me, that is reflected on the final agenda on June 17th. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, Mayor, to address that, this is a perfect timing for me too. I can certainly bring that back with those options for you, Councilmember Ibarra. But I wanted to let the council know that staff has discussed this. We've actually thought about moving the final budget meeting to the 24th. That's the meeting that was going to be held in conjunction with the special meeting to discuss the community survey results with our city's revenue and polling consultants. We need a little bit more time with the bargaining groups. So if you're amenable to that, we'd bring the final budget back on the 24th, which is already scheduled as a special meeting.
Okay.
With Councilmember Ibarra's reconsideration.
All right, very good. All right, council members, any items?
Yes, I'd just like to address the city this time. I just want to take this time to address the public and their concerns about the state of our city and our country in light of the last couple of days. I do not believe that speech is a regulated commodity, so the value of my words will vary based on whether you already agree with me and my past decisions, whether you like me or you don't. So instead, I only ask you as a person who shares the city with you to just look back at our shared history as Americans and see the many times we questioned the fortitude of our way of life, and yet we overcame. And we will overcome the challenges in front of us today, just like we did in the past. So please help one another in these difficult times because we have a pretty shared future. So please look out for one another.
Okay, thank you. All right.
I have a comment.
Well, these are items
something to bring back to the community, to committee.
Okay, so, go ahead. Items to be referred to.
So every time we get close to the 4th of July, everybody wants to bring up, we need to talk about fireworks. Mm-hmm. We want to talk about it right before the 4th of July. So what I say, let's bring it back. Let's bring it back in August. And let's talk about it for the next 4th of July instead of trying to do something at the last minute and just hold something. We need to get it out before. So what I say to bring up to committee is we talk about the 4th of July for 2021, and let's work from that instead of something that would happen in 2020 because we only have a month to talk about it. So let's talk about it before that. That's what I want to bring back, talking about and discussing the illegal fireworks for the 4th of July. I truly believe that, because I won't be here, but I truly believe that it's not the fireworks that are sold at the corner convenience of fireworks for the kids. You know, I just truly believe that it's the illegal fireworks that's the biggest problem.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember. Councilman Charette.
Thank you. Basine, I wish you were sitting here with me right now because you would hear what's going on up here in the north end.
And I promise you, it's worse where I am.
Well, I'm not going to argue that.
And it's worse where I am.
But it's a serious problem. Everyone's experiencing. I know Henry, all of us up there in the north end, of course, and we're talking about illegal fireworks. And you all are sitting down there experiencing earthquakes in City Hall, and I'm sitting up here listening to it sounds like a war zone right now. And I don't know what the answer is for that. I still, and we can discuss this, I'm not on that particular committee, but I agree with you. It's not the Safe and Sane that bring in some revenue to the city and bring in revenue to our nonprofits. It's these illegal ones. And again, I'll say what I said earlier. What about illegal don't we understand? And it's the illegal ones that are a problem. And they've been described to me as anything that goes boom and anything that goes in the air. And I just need to figure out how we're going to send a message that is just not acceptable in our community.
Right.
And I don't want to mix up the Safe and Sane with the illegal ones. And they're not setting off Safe and Sane right tonight. Those aren't even going to go on sale until about the 2nd of July. What is going on right now are illegal fireworks, period. They're being brought in from Mexico or from out of state or from wherever. And there are a bunch of people that just don't get it and understand, not only in a fire hazard area, but in just people talk about their dogs having to, be have sedatives and what have you. We've got to do something about this fireworks. And it's not just in the month of July or the month of January anymore. It's constantly.
I would like to remind you that you did take a big step by approving the ordinance last month that will raise the fines for that, and hopefully we can set some strong examples from some folks doing this.
And Terry, that's great, and I appreciate that. It's catching them, and we've got to get the people engaged and be willing to step up and be a whistleblower and say, yes, I saw that person. I've heard so many people say that and the chief could respond to this. So many people say they're willing to, and we don't do anything about it. Now, that's a broad statement. I'm sure we're doing something about it, but we've got to say and make the public aware that if you don't say something, then don't complain about it.
Yeah, you go.
If you're not willing to point the finger and help us with this issue, then don't complain about it.
I think the opportunity is we as a community need to report. We need to report our neighbor, and that's going to take some courage. But you got to do it. I mean, we have a lot of people complaining in our community, and when you correspond with the public comments on fireworks, and yet there's no reporting from those community groups, you got to do your part, community. You got to call 383-5311, and our police dispatch will take that firework complaint and we'll follow up with it. So,
Right.
Councilmember Mulvihill.
We see that that's not working, so we need to do something better than that.
Councilman Mulvihill.
Yeah, this is an issue that's really begun to bother me. Over the last 7 or 8 years, we've been outsourcing so many of our services. We outsource trash, and presumably that brings us some sort of a franchise of a couple $1 million a year, plus they've taken over our yards and our vehicles. We've outsourced the city attorney's office, and presumably compared to what we had before, that saves us at least $1.5 million to $2 million per year. We've outsourced parks maintenance. We've outsourced fire. And yet we're running a deficit. Our expenses are up. And I'd like to know where have the expenses been rising most rapid? In other words, they're absorbing all the funds that presumably we've been saving by all this outsourcing, and we're not ahead from where we were. And I'd like to know, in a more precise way, where have we been spending more money in services that has really absorbed all the savings that we've presumably been achieving in all this outsourcing that we've been doing. Obviously, our revenues are flat, and Henry, I think, has been very seriously working on that, and I think the rest of us have as well. But what units have been expanding in terms of the amount of money they've been absorbing out of this? Because we don't seem to be ahead at all. And I'd like to know a little bit more, or in an organized way, where we're spending more money.
Okay, well, we've done a couple presentations to you the last couple times. We did the 10-year history of our finances and kind of explained that to you, but we'd be happy to bring something back or address
Please, I really wish you would. The 10-year history, bring it back again, and I'd like to know, because it's really starting to bother me.
Yeah, and I
because we're
understand,
gonna-
I understand. You're correct with the plan of adjustment. Even with those adjustments that you've made, you're absolutely correct. Our revenues still are not enough to cover our expenditures. You're absolutely correct.
And so obviously again, we've outsourced these services, and each one, guaranteed that we're going to be saving $1 million or a couple of $1 million. And what's happened? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, council members. Councilman Nickel.
Yeah, a couple of items. Just to piggyback on the fireworks, I know that we utilize the Go Request app, code enforcement, a lot of other city matters. Fireworks, from what I can see, is not on there, and I'd like to have it added on the Go Request app so that individuals have some mechanism to report and that we can start to monitor this. I think that would be very effective and something I can promote to constituents. The other thing is, as I mentioned before, I'd like a debrief on what occurred on Sunday. I think we also may want to start thinking about should we get a second wave of COVID in the winter or fall, ensuring that we learn from what occurred over the last few months, particularly as relates to response, evidence collection. I know a lot of property crimes, basically, obviously because of COVID, they were not being responded to in the same way. I am very concerned as to what our statistics may look like in terms of were they actually reported, were dispatchers actually taking the reports even though police weren't responding. I'd like some clarity on that. So I think if we could get a debrief, maybe next council meeting on what occurred on Sunday and provide some input. I think all of us as council members saw things and heard things and talked to people that I think can help us have a better response next time and really understand what occurred and how we can improve. Again, I want my hats off to our police and all of our city staff and everybody who responded. But we should certainly debrief and learn how we can respond better. But a debrief on COVID at some point, maybe not next meeting, but I would like to have it sometime before the fall and the winter to assess how we might provide a mechanism for our residents to provide reports and or evidence. I got a lot of information that people had reported or called and there was no response, and they're concerned that the crime was not going to show up in our statistics or anywhere. That may not be the case, but I'd like to understand that. And then also finally, I know that we worked with a firm about 2 years ago to develop that comprehensive facilities assessment. I know we got a presentation on it, but as of yet, I have not seen the final assessment. And I know there's some concerns about that. Maybe we need to agendize something in closed session, but I know a lot of these topics are coming back in terms of City Hall, in terms of our budget as relates to buildings and other facilities, obviously the golf course now tonight. I think we need to see that final assessment and as policymakers really understand what recommendations come out of that and what we need to look at long-term in terms of our overall facilities portfolio. And whether or not we start to divest ourselves of certain properties or otherwise. So if we can get that on those items on, so the Sunday's debrief, the COVID debrief at some point, and then that facilities assessment, perhaps in closed session if that's appropriate.
Thank you, Henry.
Like to do that soon. Thank you.
Councilmember Barra.
Going off on COVID, I'd like to see an update from our city. I know the county got the green light from our governor to start opening now. One of the items they listed on May 23rd was that banks, convenience stores, essential state and local government functions to start opening. I would assume that's our planning department, all our counters to open up, even including our animal shelter. So it'd be good to get an update on that. Sure. Doesn't be on an agenda.
But I could say that update is on a case by case basis, Sandra. I'm sorry, Councilmember Ibarra. I think that like my office is opening up with the County of San Bernardino, but we are opening up on Monday where we're doing half staff and you still have to social distance. And there's a whole lot of things that you have to do before you just open up. So it's not opening up full force. It's just opening up mainly by appointment only.
By appointments, exactly. That means
Yes, by appointment only. So yes. So I agree that the city may need to look at that and see how we could open up and serve our community appointment only, but not just open up full force and just say all our doors are open, because our doors are not open. We're still in the state of emergency.
Okay, so I will.
Yeah, I will definitely keep you posted. Every week it's changing. We're getting more safety measures in place so that we can make sure our employees are protected first. And so we'll be opening up slowly. So I will definitely keep you updated every week on what we've got going on.
Okay, thank you. All right, at this meeting, I thank council members. The meeting's adjourned. Thank you and have a good night and be well.